by subscribing and leaving comments.
We had an incident in which we counted 17 tracks coming up a log grade. You see one here, one here, one here. This is Bobby Carr. He was a student at the time. Now he is the chief archaeologist for Dade County, Florida. He is the young man that was responsible for finding the camel bones in the Everglades to prove that the camel originated in America, not in Arabia. He was a bright, bright young man. I'm very pleased to have him on my team. Here's Bobby and myself. We were investigating. Everybody says they go into caves, they go into lavitudes. Well, I've been in lots of lavitudes. I have not seen one single piece of evidence that they go into lavitudes. This was the track that was taken in 1971 or 72, right here. And this mud was so hard that George Harrison, managing editor of the National Wildlife Federation, had to stomp his foot down and could hardly make an indentation. So don't think this is soft mud. It's not. This is in the very, very early spring. And that's George's foot there, and these are the tracks here. I think it was, don't hold me because it's been 20 years. I think it was 5.5 to 6 inches across, something like that. Good size. They wrote it up in 1971, National Wildlife Federation. Here was the sighting in the Dells in which Mr. Medeiros down here had observed one for about 20 minutes, walked across here and said it was halfway above these trees, like so. These are some logger friends of mine that are coming out and helping me. Driving down one of the roads, I happened to notice a zigzag trail. Now, animals make a lot of weavy trails, but only man, if he wants to go from point A to point B, will make an intelligent, calculated zigzag trail. So I did what I normally do. I go to the bottom, I go to the top, I saw no signs of habitation or even old tracks. So then I went into the old records. I found no evidence of ever this being used by Indians or by the settlers. Then I started finding dead animals down at the bottom. I found cattle and deer. Two of the carcasses that I found, their ribs had been broken in one specific area, possibly by a rock, shall we say. But one in specific really intrigued me. These femurs had been twisted out of the pelvic area. The right one was twisted out clockwise, the other one counterclockwise. The bristle was still attached. Can you imagine the power necessary to twist those out? They weren't cut, they were twisted out. And also a very curious thing, on virtually all the skeletons that we found, the heads were missing. Their heads were missing.
And none of that's been cooked?
No, sir. No, sir. Crossing the road, we collected hair and found tracks on both sides of here, on both sides of the fence. We found hair that was analyzed to be anthropoid, or let's see, humanoid, but not Homo sapien. Here's the Columbia River. On the other side of this, downstream, which was most important, it was downstream. We found a similar fence with hair that matched. Why is it important downstream? Because if you swim, you're most likely going to be carried downstream. You're getting my approach to things. I try to go one step at a time and try to make it. If it doesn't fit logically, then I really bounce
Is it
back.
close to that topography, volcanic lava?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. You can see it here. This young lady had found mullein in the springtime that had been folded over and bitten. Bitten, not cut. Bitten and folded. Very interesting. I have no idea what that you know Peter Herkos. He was at one time a very, very famous psychic. He offered to help me. All it would cost me is $20,000.
Cheap at half the price.
Yeah, I thought, gee, wow, appreciate that. Going on, how many of you are familiar with dowsers? Ah, a lot of dowsers. Dowsers normally are equated with finding water. However, there are other dowsers that are more attuned to other things. They are able to expand. Some do map dowsing. This gentleman, now going back to my science advisory board, I get a telephone call from Dr. E.E. Bloss Hedlund. He was the senior physician in the United States Navy at the time. He had represented the United States in Antarctica for the International Geophysical Year. If he calls and tells you something, you kind of pay attention, will you? This guy calls me and says, Bob, I think you ought to use a dowser. And I said, Lord, we got a bad connection here. What are you talking? I'm having enough trouble finding it. Now you want me to go looking for water? No, he said, I'm serious. He said, this man is employed by the United States Navy to find flyers shot down in Vietnam, in the Gulf of Tonkin, and he lived in the Navy. And he was batted a good average. He was successful. Folks, I don't know how it works. I wouldn't pretend to know how it works. But this man was one of the founders of the American Society of Dowsers. His name was John Shelley. John dowsed. I decided to set up a blind experiment. I will try virtually anything, except walking down Hollywood Boulevard on Saturday night. Anyway, I will try virtually anything, but I'm very meticulous. I let everybody play out their string. But let's go to the bottom line. This gentleman, I gave him blind maps that I had cross-indexed myself on the telephone. We had him involved, and he engineered an actual encounter, killing the fact. It actually happened. And I had, because I don't have a PhD, I had to have a PhD with me to make that verify, but we did, and we had this. And John Shelley flew out after doing successful map dowsing with us. Flew out to help us on site. Here's John Shelley, and this is a biologist from Cornell. This gentleman is an anthropologist, University of Southern California. Bobby Carr, archaeologist. This is the famous Jim McLaren. I don't even, old-time Bigfoot researchers know Jim. This fellow is a biologist. This guy's an attorney. I don't know what the hell are you doing here? And that was the name of my company at the time, Vanguard Research. And John is showing them how to dowse. Now, nobody believed it. Nobody believed it. These guys are scientists. And yet this guy made things work. Here is John actually dowsing the maps of Mount St. Helens. Now, I'll tell you folks, these maps and these photographs were never, ever, ever shown to anyone. Nobody even knew what I was doing until after Mount St. Helens blew up. Why? Because I didn't want some killer grabbing these maps like this, because there's the movement routes. That's the way they work. I don't mind showing them now for obvious reasons.
How big are each of those for
1 mile.
640?
Pretty good size. And there you are. This is how we had not only dowsed now, folks, this isn't just his dowsing. We verified these movements. We had 2.5 gallons of feces found by a dowser who was in Maine, and we were out there, and I sent an anthropologist and a biologist out, and I asked them to check the specific ridge in this specific area for feces, and they found it, and they came back, and when I told them how I knew it, they didn't believe me. I said, well, folks, there it is. 2.5 gallons. There it is. I told them, I said, that is the longest phone call in the world to find a bunch of crap. This was analyzed at Washington State University. We discovered that there was some rather curious things. This was in the spring of the year. We found that in the feces, it was not only feeding on succulents, but it also had hair in it. Now, that means it's not an elk. No way in the world. Anybody knows elk hunting knows darn well that's no elk. A bear, 2.5 gallons, he'd have a service pull in town. Not going to be a bear. So, but the curious thing is we found wiregrass Now, wiregrass has no intrinsic value as a nutrient. There's no reason for animals to eat it. And then I found out an old-fashioned naturalist told me, he said in the spring, animals do eat wiregrass as a purgative to clean themselves out in the spring. And there we are. So Bigfoot's a pretty smart fellow. This was some of the expedition 1974. Mike Plesnick, one of the best trackers I've ever run into in my life. And I discovered this guy in the middle of the Everglades, and I had hired him. I was doing a film down there, and I had hired this guy as a cook. And I made a comment to my cinematographer. I was talking about controlled things, you know. I was talking about little things like film that you get in the, that you buy, you know, a stock footage we call it. I said, we need the rattlesnake, and we need the coon, and we need the alligator. He said, well, I haven't been able to find any. He's talking about stock footage. The next morning, this guy comes in barefoot in the back of his van. He had the maddest alligator and the biggest snake you'd ever want to see. He went out and got him, threw him in the back of his van, brought him. He said, there they are.
Good.
This is true. Now, this guy, you saw him in the film, perhaps. There he is, barefoot. I had a tough time getting shoes. Every time I put shoes on, he got blisters. Anyway, Anne Swain was a sociologist. This is Len Aiken and his wife, an Indian historian. This is the sound man from the film company. This fellow here was an interesting man. He's a biologist. These two were buddies. This guy's with the Tennessee Valley Authority, and this is my, this is Elizabeth Mormon, Eliza Mormon. She was my Lady Jane Goodall. And what I would do is throw tractors into an area. Oh no, take it back. First I throw my scientists in the area. I want to know what's eating what. When they would come back with a specific report, I'd yank them out and send them my trackers. When the trackers come back and say, yep, saw something, I'd yank everybody out and send her in alone. All by herself. And she had success. I can't go any further than that at this time for a lot of reasons, but believe me, it's an intriguing story. I couldn't get a guy to spend it out there unless he had a can. But this little girl was out there by herself.
What year?
This was taken 1974. But these two fellows, I couldn't figure out why these two guys were so interested in the Bigfoot. They're very well established in the scientific community. And I found out why. These two guys, as students at the University of Florida, on a field trip, saw a Bigfoot in Florida, and no one would believe them. So they did like any other smart scientist, they shut up. And they sat on it for 20 years. And when they met me, they said, let us go. And now I knew why. There's Mr. Peter Byrne, famous tiger hunter. So you have a good idea who he is. And this fellow here is the Tennessee Valley Authority, very well respected man. This is Ape Canyon, famous Ape Canyon that some of you researchers will recall where Fred Beck bragged about shooting Bigfoot, knocking it down in the canyon. This is the gentleman I was speaking of earlier, and up in the area, have you heard this? He reported to me, I've heard chimpanzee-like screams and calls, the breaking of squaw wood, the smacking of the trees. This is the place that they named after me, bless their hearts, called Morgan's March, because I spent so much time there. But you can't tell me that Bigfoot couldn't walk through there and drop down behind something. You couldn't see it. We had had a sighting right between these two trees, and the Bigfoot was running in this direction for these woods. Your local dummy here took off after him, threw this so fast I ran right off the cliff. Straight down, ended up with a concussion and 3 separated ribs. Anyway, Annie, she's smart. She stood still. I went into the woods going this way. It came out here, stood over the top of here and looked at it and walked on down. It had to be at least 7 foot tall to do that.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Anne Swain, you know what she's doing now?
She's married and having children.
Just a chance, there's Anne Swain that lives south of here.
Oh, no. She's living in Coconut Grove, Florida. Very fine family. Wonderful. This is through a night vision device they used to use in Vietnam. Huge things. The Army gave it to us and then took it back. We had an interesting, exciting thing here. This was this young lady's 16th birthday. She's half Cherokee Indian, Eliza Mormon, Mount Avenue. We brought her up for her birthday. Right after that picture was taken, we recorded the first, as far as I know, scream exchange between man and Bigfoot. within just moments. And I snapped this picture, and believe me, we have torn this thing apart from A to Z. We've never been able to discover a Bigfoot in it. This logger did not believe in Bigfoot. Didn't want to believe in Bigfoot. It took his men 3 days to allow us to come down onto his property to examine 161 tracks in the line. There's Dr. Grover Krantz. I'm sure most of you are familiar with him. He's one of the finest researchers that we know of. And if you have anything that you need verified or you really want a serious man to look at it, I highly recommend Dr. Grover Krantz, Washington State University, Pullman, Washington. Tell you what, when you squat down next to 161 of these in line, it tends to get your attention.
What was the date on that clock?
It varied over varying terrain, and I really don't recall the measurement, but it was more than, in fact, I'll show you, but I don't remember the actual. I think these were 17 and a half inches long. You can see the toe prints. I'm sure you folks have seen a lot of these.
What was that you outlined with?
Just ordinary darning cloth.
Oh.
Yeah, I go very simple.
How long was the stride, the step?
Ma'am, I don't recall, but I can show. I don't remember the numbers because it's been a long time. But I'll show you how long it was in just a second. That's me.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
That's the best I can do.
That's about 4 feet, huh?
Yes, I would say that. Yes. I knew I had to get a new pair of pants. I just want to make sure you guys are awake back here. Trying to visualize how tall is between 7 and 8 foot. And these guys, we all look up there and we said, it's time to go get a hamburger. You can see the difference there. And if you put me right about it, this is 5 foot, I'm right about here. That's serious. I'm sure this is old hat to you folks. But for those that aren't, the broad heel, the helix is extraordinarily critical to note, because you notice the larger toes are in the center of a bear. Anyone that doesn't know a bear print from a humanoid or a Bigfoot track doesn't belong with us. They really shouldn't be there. Dr. Krantz, one of his smiling moods, he doubles for Bela Lugosi. Yes, cookie evening, come into my house. This is a normal Bigfoot foot, right, with the drawing on it. This is human, and this is the famous crippled foot. And I shocked Grover. He had found this near Colville Indian Reservation. About 180-some miles south, we found the same track. Very intriguing. And this could not have been fake, because in order to understand what would happen to a toe or to a foot that had been broken in this area, and to put these extraordinary pads out here, you had to be a comparative anatomist to be able to do it. This is Dr. Butler, and this is the American Bigfoot, and this is the Yeti footprint that was brought back by Dr. Carlton Coon. This is a handprint, and you can't bring this one in focus. I met a photographer did know that. This is the handprint, the first one that was taken, and came up with the sweat pores and everything else that Dr. Krantz had taken. This was a rendition of sightings at this time. This is in the 1970s. As you can see, we left out Ohio completely. There's just a few. But here's what, you remember the earlier map I asked you to kind of remember on the intrusion of man, the movement of man, and look at this curious blackened area that is almost a direct overlay. That caught my attention. Why? These are the major American tribes of Indians in 1850 who had first-person accounts of Bigfoot. Not second hand, first person. And I find that curious. Whether there's a relationship, I have a slight idea. The Judaquaw, the Quaggle, Tlingit, Bellicudus, has the whistling mouth. Why? Because they imitate bird calls, and I'm sure you all are familiar with that. But I found something interesting here. Well, we'll get into that in a second. This gentleman here, you've never seen an Indian chief that big? You have? You've seen one that big? Boy, I want to get a picture of him too. This is the Chief Laluska of the Quagga Indians. You see the tunic. This is the famous button blankets they used to wear. And he is also one of the world's master carvers of cedar. He makes the Tuniclaw masks. Now the Tuniclaw mask, and you know, people think that these that Indians are savages and all this other stuff. I got to tell you something. If you ever spent any time among the Quagga or the cedar people up in the British Columbia, some of their plays in the longhouses at night were as intricate as Shakespeare. Believe me. But this mask is a transformation mask. Now these are people who made things, but they didn't have hinges or anything else. They had to do this all by hand. This is a Tuniclaw. Notice the whistling mop. And this giant comes in, and she has a little basket over her arm. And she comes in and looks for little boys that are going to go to sleep, and they get them and put them in the basket. Yeah. But she'll turn away from you, and she'll pull a little string, and look, transformation. Now what does the Indians think? They think that a human is inside that monster mask. And let's go one step further, folks. They have another one. They believe it has a soul. There isn't a single Indian nation in America whose name for the Bigfoot does not involve something that equates with people. They don't believe they're monsters. They don't believe they're anything. They are people. Wild people, call them stick Indians, whatever. This is, now let's jump south, 1,500 miles. Now we're down in a place called New Mexico. Rio Grande River. Coach the Indian Reservation. I heard of a legend. And being a nosy little guy, I got to go check it out. I found petroglyphs. Look. Look at the whistling mouth. Identical. 1,500, 1,800 miles south. I found on a rock the human footprint. And look at this. And these are dated, according to the university down there, about 700 years ago. Look at this big belly, which is normal to a creature that has to eat a lot of veggies to stay alive if they're that big. Their bellies get big. Now that happened to me when I was drinking beer, but they didn't have a chance for that. And look at this one. This one, if you look at this one carefully, feet, the body, the hand, bending over. And look at this. Look at the legs and the arms of a tiny being in the clutches of a monster. Did you folks see that? Is that clear? This is a place called Geshpega, the place where the giant is shut up. Now notice, we're 1,800 miles south. They have the same essential story of a female. It's got to be a female, you know. The guys don't do stuff. So they go out and they eat the kids up. Guy would. Anyway, there she is. And the Indians who were with me would not show me the cave where they ended up shutting up this evil giant. They showed me the rock, the Bigfoot sign, the power sign. Here she is in her cave, shut up in Geshpega. Fine. I said, where is it? They won't tell me. They just jumped their chin. They wouldn't even, now these are modern Indians. They wouldn't even look across the river, and if you look along this slope, look, two rocks set into the mouth of a cave. So, I make a fast trip by myself in lines, jump off the side. I scream a lot, and this is what I found. And I found chinking in here. It's on an Indian reservation. Can't open it up. They won't let you open it up. They have a pact with me. If they ever change their mind, I get to open it. Because I'd love to drill inside of this and yank those out, because behind this you may find bones of not only children, you may find Now there's a big problem. Here comes the United States Army Corps of Engineers. They built the biggest land earthen dam in the country, right on that river. That's a little hard. This young man worked for me in the Everglades. His name is Robert Tiger. Robert Tiger broke the taboos of his tribe by working with me. His buddy had worked with me just prior to that and committed suicide. This young man continued on with me. He took me out to a burial mound, which was again bad luck. This boy was murdered not too long after this happened. But he is showing me the footprint of a Bigfoot, Chowinapchobi. He was Kachinati. That's what they call it. The man of the night. The water boy of the night. Stepped out on the road, looked at him, and stepped back. Within 4 months he was dead. He lived on for 2 years. I go out in the Everglades. It's the easiest way to go, believe me, and get out of the muck and the mire. Are there Bigfoot in Florida? Absolutely. No question of it. This gentleman here, I've had a lot of people laugh, all this fellow with his thin legs and all that. This is the last living Miccosukee Indian medicine man of the old type.
Are they Seminole?
These are Miccosukee. Now let me tell you the difference between Miccosukee and Seminole. Everyone's heard of the Seminole Nation. But if you look in the annals of history, no such Indian tribe ever existed. Why? Because in the Trail of Tears, when we rounded up the Choctaw and the Chickasaw, we brought in the Hitchites and the Creeks and the Swoogies and the Cherokees, and we marched them out. Some of them ran away. They didn't want to go out there. And they went to the northern end of Florida. So someone saw that there were some Indians living out there. There was a tribe down there, and they said to the other Indians, "Who's those Indians down there?" And they said in their own language, "Those are the runaways. Seminole. The runaways. And in our inestimable wisdom, we make them the Seminoles." There's two tribes down there primarily, the Creek-speaking people and the Hitchites. This was the Hitchites. This gentleman here, there's no question in his mind about Bigfoot. And if the Indians cooperate with the white man, they will have bad luck. Well, here we are back at Mount Adams, and this is where I'm going to be back very shortly from now. I'm looking for my favorite girlfriend, and I'm sorry to take it so long, but that's the end of it. Do you have any questions before I? Yes, ma'am.
The
I'm
tracks,
sorry, no, yeah.
the tracks that you found, you said it was 170?
161.
161, okay, well, they had directly one in front of the other, or were they side by side?
No, ma'am. Rather interesting thing. Oh, wait. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They came down off of a hillside, walked down onto a valley, and around a place where they were burning slash. Burning slash is when you cut trees down and cut off all the limbs, drag it off the side, put it in a pile, and burn it. It's all burning slash. An interesting thing was, halfway down this hill, and I'm tracking along on my hands and knees, and checking everything out, and I'm watching for toe cracks and all these other things. All of a sudden, the steps got closer together. And I couldn't figure that out. Why? Halfway down, this guy starts mincing his steps. Bothered me, because I like to know why. So I went back up and I worked it again, and it came out the same thing. And all of a sudden, I stepped back and I started going back up the hill, and I looked back over and I said, wait a minute. Where that guy started walking with his steps close together was at the point where a 7-foot person would have first seen the light of that fire. I was observing in the ground an emotional reaction. That tended to reaction. Yes, sir?
I read a book on what was called The Way You Saw Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And it took place
like it? Yeah. Read that again. I recall hearing something about that. You might want to read that a second time after hearing this. See what else you hear. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Your young assistant, very recently, you showed a picture of said he was murdered.
Yes, sir.
Would we dare ask how?
No, he did a very strange thing. There are two roads. One is called Tamiami Trail. It links Miami, Florida with the west coast of Florida. It goes right through the Nicosia Reservation. Parallel to that, going through their reservation, is a smaller road. For some reason, he was very upset, and his mother didn't know why. And his mother asked him to go down and get a little bread, just to give him something to do. Rather than take the pickup truck, he took an ATV. You call it here, we call it ATCs. Why he took that, we don't know. He went 1 mile down the road, he got his bread, he started back. As he approached a large tunnel of trees, he suddenly turned that ATC around, went back toward the store and up onto the main highway, where he was hit by a car and drug about 100 cars when hitting out. The problem is the car didn't put on a brake light and continued on. The Indians have had this happen before. They called immediately the sheriff's department, state highway patrol, who happened to be 2 miles down the road at Route 41, where it intersects. There are no roads between there. There's nowhere to go. You've got to go that way. Nobody came by. So they set up a roadblock on the other side, being sure nobody still had gone by. If you've ever driven this road, it's a one-way shot.
Yeah.
The next morning they flew the canals, looking for somebody to dump their car into the canal, because the oil will show up, the gas will show up. They have never found that car, ever. They don't know what happened to the car. The Indians call it that. Well, John Shelley had an incident, which is too late to go into right now, with us, in which Mr. Shelley had an encounter right after we took that photograph. And Mr. Shelley, we heard the scream. Mr. Shelley had a bad heart, ran at that altitude to get to us. We got him out. He lost his powers of dowsing. We got him here. So far, I've had 7.
Would you say these were most likely connected with a Bigfoot?
I don't know.
In the lore of UFOs, particularly John Keating, much is said and done about the purported men in black, purported I say, riding purported antique automobiles, which incidentally disappeared. Now, I see much has been done with John Keel. I'm thinking particularly of this the 8th Tower, and even oh, all right, the 8th Tower and Love Prophecies.
Unfortunately, I must plead a lot of ignorance on the UFO.
Well, it's just another parallel thought because of the subject matter nature of it.
Each and every accident can be explained away. What strikes me is the constancy of it. And I don't know how to react to it. I tend now to go work primarily by myself or with a very few people that understand. Because we've had an interesting history. And I would urge all of you to be careful.
Along with all of your vocations and avocations, have you encountered anybody dealing with those?
Yes, sir.
How did he?
Yes, sir. I must tell you, I worked with the Federal Aviation Administration in Washington for 7 years. I was a fuel specialist, and I was present one night when we tracked it, and it was my tapes that the government kind of took. I know what they saw, and there's a lot out there. This is why these young guys sitting down here, they've got an interesting life ahead of them. And I just spoke with a group of Boy Scouts here. You guys Scouts? Are you really? All right. That is one of the greatest things that's going to happen to you. Really, you have an opportunity to learn so much from the Scouts. All those merit badges, tickets, just to help you all through life. Yes, ma'am. One last question.
You mentioned a young fella committed suicide.
Yes, ma'am.
We didn't know why. I mean,
No one knew why. He became extraordinarily depressed shortly after he came off. He got very overwhelmed. Is this happenstance? Is it accidental? At first, I washed each one of them all away. But sometimes when you start kicking off your fingers, you start looking.
Any indication of occult influence?
Occult influence?
Occult
Yes.
influence?
No, not to my knowledge. Well, thank you very much, folks, for having me down. I appreciate it. I gave him a fucking chance.
It's a shame nobody had a tape recorder going tonight.
Okay, I'm going to take a break. Again, the raffle tickets bought each trip $2. And after the break, we'll get into some recent activity.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.